Today I'm going to show you how to make chicken and apple stuffed peppers. I start out with 3 chicken breasts, which serves about 5 people. I ended up using 4.5 peppers to get 9 halves. 3 onions, or 1 large one will do. And I used 3 apples to make sure that the chicken and apple ratio is pretty even. I used about a tablespoon of thyme, about 2 teaspoons of salt, and I actually needed 2 cans of peeled stewed tomatoes. And I used a little honey instead of sugar to sweeten it up. I start out by searing my chicken breast on both sides. I actually only use salt. I'm not a big fan of pepper. And I don't cook it all the way through. I give it a little chance to stay a little pink, so when I do put it in the mix that it has some room left to cook. Next, I peel, core, and prepare my apples to dice alongside my onions that you'll see. I kind of have a system to this. It goes a little faster if I first peel the apple and cut out the tops and bottom of the apple. I actually remove the core using a measuring spoon. That's a 1/2 teaspoon measuring spoon. So then I start on the onions as well. And this will go in the skillet together. I diced the onion relatively small, but I diced the apple a little bit larger to match the chunks of chicken that I'll add later. I use the same skillet that I cooked the chicken in to kind of deglaze, as well as add a little more flavor that wouldn't be there otherwise. The only spice that I use is thyme, which I add at this point to cook down with the apples and onions together. You can also add garlic or oregano or basil, other things that might suit your taste. I also add about a 1/2 teaspoon of salt to the apples and onions at this point. I actually needed 2 cans of peeled stewed tomatoes at this point, but I didn't realize it until I started putting everything in the skillet and realizing that it wasn't getting as red as I needed it to be, or I'm used to it being. So I actually had to compensate with a little bit of tomato paste. What I'm mixing up here is the topping that goes on top of the peppers, but like I say again, I had to compensate with a little extra tomato paste, where you see I put a spoon in there. And I also added salt at this point, and the honey to take the acidity out of the tomato. I would say that this can of tomatoes wasn't doing me much justice, because I'm used to there being at least 4 to 5 stewed tomatoes in the can, but there was only 2. So again, I have to make up for that later on. And I just do a rough chop of the tomatoes before I add them to the skillet to have them break down a little bit easier. I would prefer to have more tomato pieces in it, but sometimes you have to work with what you have. So here I add the tomatoes along with a little bit of the sauce that I mixed up earlier with the honey and the salt to add a little more red color to my mix. Normally I simply drain the tomatoes of their juice and sauce, using that as a topping, leaving the tomatoes to color the rest of the mix. Here I prep the chicken to be diced, making sure I add the liquid that's produced from the chicken resting back to the skillet. And I just give the chicken a rough chop, making sure they're about equal size pieces, maybe 1/2 inch in size. And I add the chicken to the mix, along with a can of water, so it kind of cooks down together. It takes about, I would say, 10 or 15 minutes to get to the consistency I want. I also add the salt here, and which is not normal, a can of tomato paste, to give me the color that I prefer. And it starts to come together, like I said, in about 10 or 15 minutes. I actually cooked this uncovered to speed the process up a little bit. I use foil in the bottom of my oven safe dish, and prep the peppers by cutting them in half first and kind of breaking them loose so they don't break on me. You have to be kind of careful. And get the core out and the veins. Along with the seeds. And give it a little tap. And the foil is just to kind of keep the peppers upright and in place. This next step is optional, but I found that if I blanch the peppers in water before they go in the oven, they cook a lot faster. And I leave them in there for about, I would say, 5 minutes until they start to change color slightly, and the white vein portion of the pepper starts to turn a little more yellow. And just arrange the peppers in the dish. And add the filling 1 spoon at a time to each pepper, so that they kind of end up even. You also want to do the same with the sauce, so that it's evenly dispersed over all the peppers. And finally, you add a bit of thyme to the top of each pepper to finish them off. I would say I use about 1.5 tablespoons of thyme throughout the whole recipe. Lastly, I add a little bit of olive oil to the top foil that will cover my peppers so the foil doesn't stick to my peppers. I let this bake for about 30 minutes and cut off the oven and let it rest. Still in the oven for another 10 or so. Here I serve the peppers with wild rice with grated carrot. It's also nice with roasted potatoes or mashed potatoes. There was also a spinach salad as a starter.